is Ed Wilson. I'm the Microsoft scripting guy. And today we are going to talk about the Windows PowerShell Essentials. This is going to be part 2 of 5. And our topic today is heard it through the pipeline, or how to compound PowerShell commands for fun and profit. And indeed, it will be fun, and it should be profitable to you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and move forward. So what is the pipeline? Well, the pipeline is something that is rather different in the Windows world. Other command shells have had the ability to work with the pipeline and to take stuff and pipe it from one command to another quite easily. But in the Windows world, this is something that we haven't done very much of. And so the pipeline really makes it simple for us to work at the command line. It allows us to take items from one command and then to be able to further process them to continue to work on them. This lets us filter data out of stuff. It allows us to store information in various formats. It also allows us to format the output. Now, there's a number of PowerShell commandlets that just automatically accept input from other commandlets. As an example of this is get process. We can easily pipe it to stop process. We can use get help on a commandlet and find out if it accepts pipelined input. So the pipeline in Windows PowerShell, though, is a little bit different than it is in other environments. And the reason for this is because that Windows PowerShell's pipeline allows us to actually work with objects. And so whereas other command lines will take strings of data and then we'll pass it and send it to other commands, but in Windows PowerShell we actually pipe objects. And learning how to work with these objects and learning how to explore these objects really opens up a whole another world for us. Now, I'm going to give us some examples here in just a little bit. But as an example here in the slide deck, which is available for download, after this presentation. For instance, we can work with processes. So I can use get process, and I can tell it to get processes, related to Notepad or to calculator. And then I can easily use that same command to get my processes related to Notepad and calculator and to send it to stop process. So I don't have to, work with these things individually. And this really allows us to kind of build these commands together. In one respect, they're kind of like these building blocks that you may have used when you were a child, or maybe your children use nowadays. And that is that these commands, you can just simply take one command and you stick it on top of another command, and then you can stick that command on top of another command. And so working with these things, can actually be quite fun. It also is an iterative process, and so that we build our commands up a little bit at a time. Now, this is where things really begin to get interesting in Windows PowerShell, because we start off with a command that looks relatively short and easy to work with, and then, we tack on another command and another command and another command, and pretty soon we'll wind up with a command that's like 2 or 3 or 4 lines long, and we begin to think, oh my goodness, what a great big old long, complicated command. But we didn't start off with that long, complicated command. Instead, we start off with a small command, and then another small command, and another small command, and then eventually we wind up with a great big long command. So So in my slide here, I begin, first of all, I just say, get process. And I give it two commands. I want it to find Notepad and I want it to find calculator. And then I would just use my up arrow. And then once I have my up arrow, then I'm going to just send that to stop process. So this is a long command, get process, Notepad, calculator, stop process. But it didn't start off that way. I kind of built it. Now, in another respect, I could take a Notepad and calculator, and these are just strings here. These are just the words, Notepad and calculator. And then I pipeline it. This is that up and down line right there. That's the pipeline character. And I send it to for each. And then inside that for each, then I'm going to start my process. Now, we'll come back over this type of command here in a little bit more detail in just a second. We also have, wait process. So, for instance, we could say get process Notepad, and then I call wait process, and then this allows me to, that pauses it, and then I could just go ahead and do something else later on. I'm not sure how useful this particular command right here is, but it's kind of cool. So what we want to do now is to do a demo and kind of take a look a little bit at working with some of these commands. So I'm going to now switch over and share my Windows PowerShell console. So come over here and I'm going to share my Windows PowerShell console. And you should now be looking at this nice, pretty blue Windows PowerShell console. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to use get process and just look at all of the commands that are running here. Now, kind of looking through this list here, I don't see anything that looks like Notepad, and I don't see anything that looks like calculator, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to use the up arrow and retrieve my command, and then I'm going to send this to the pipeline character, and I'm going to say more. And what this will do is this will send my PowerShell content from the get process command, and we're going to see it one page at a time. And so now I'm looking at my process names, and I don't see anything that looks like calculator running. Come on down here a little bit. I don't see anything that looks like Notepad running. I hit my space bar, and it will allow it to continue displaying the remainder of the information. And so we can see the remaining commands here, and neither calculator nor Notepad are running. And so I'm going to now start those processes. Well, one way I could do this is I could just type the name. So I'm going to say Notepad, and I'm going to say calculator, and then I'm going to send this to the for each statement. Actually, it's the for each object commandlet, but that's not the point. And then now I'm going to say that I want to start the process. And I can press tab to complete that. We talked about that yesterday. And then the $_ Now, what the $_ is this represents this item as it comes across the pipeline, right there. So the first thing that happens is the word Notepad comes across the pipeline. Now, the little up and down arrow line there is the pipeline character. So Notepad comes to the pipeline, and then for each object as it comes across the pipeline, then we are going to start the process. Well, what process are we going to start? The $_, which is the first item on my pipeline. So this comes across, and we start Notepad. Then calculator comes across the pipeline. For each object that comes across this pipeline, then we're going to start the process, and the process we will start is calculator. and that is that $_ So when working with the pipeline and Windows PowerShell 2.0, we need to understand that this $_ character represents the item as it comes across the pipeline. Now, once I run this command, then Notepad and Calculator start up. And you can't see that because I'm not sharing my entire desktop. But let's use get process. Get process, Notepad, and Calculator. And we can see that it found my calculator process and it found my Notepad process. Now, notice here, I did not have to put quotation marks around the word Notepad or around the word calculator. And the reason for this is because that get process is expecting me to give it a string. And so anything that it looks there, comes in there, it's going to expect it to be a string, and it'll go ahead and interpret it as such. So now I'm going to pipeline this information. So we've seen that get process returns an object for calculator and Notepad. Well, maybe we have. Let's send this to get member, first of all. So get member. Get member will tell me information about the object that I have. And so it displays a whole bunch of information. And we see all of this is kind of scrolled down on our screen. So I'm going to send it some more to make it a bit easier to read. And at the top of my screen, it says System Diagnostics Process. That is the type of object that is coming across the pipeline. And we can see it has a bunch of alias properties. It has some events, a bunch of methods. I press tab or the space bar, and we can see it has a bunch of properties and all of that. So that is the object that comes across the pipeline. And there's one object for calculator and one object for Notepad. So now I'm going to stop these processes. So if they stop, process. Now here, I don't have to use the for each object. I don't have to use the $_. And the reason for this is because that the stop process commandlet is smart enough to know that I'm going to hand it an object, and it's going to use that object as the input. And so this is a commandlet that is designed to accept pipeline input. And so I press enter, and Notepad and Calculator just went away. Now I'm going to use the up arrow, and as I use my up arrow, then I'm going until I get to my command that says get process Notepad and Calculator, and I press enter. Now I'm going to expect to see an error that's going to come back, and this error is going to tell me that it can't find Notepad, and another error is going to tell me it can't find Calculator. And we actually see these right here. The first one says cannot find a process with the name of Notepad, and then the second error says I can't find a process with the name of Calc. And that's exactly what we would have expected because we just stopped those two processes. Okay? So we can use get process and just accept input, and then we get those processes. We could take get process and send it through the pipeline and stop the processes. We could take a string, and as our string comes across, then we can use the for each object statement, and we can start processes. The last thing we could do is we could use wait process and then do a command. So I'm actually going to do that one. So I'm going to start Notepad first of all. So I just type in Notepad and press enter, and it starts Notepad for me. And now I'm going to use get process Notepad. So I use up arrow and retrieve the command. So I'm going to pop this to wait. process, and then I'm going to type dir, D-I-R. So it's sitting here waiting. Now I'm going to come over and stop Notepad. And once I did, then now we can see that we have our directory listing. So this can actually be kind of useful. The pipeline is the way process if we're wanting to like halt execution and wait on somebody to do something. So that makes it kind of useful. So let's go back to our slide deck. So I'll get back to my slide deck here, and we're going to go to the next slide. And so I can use the pipeline to filter information. And by using the pipeline to filter information, it allows me to take information and to work with it. So for instance, I can use get process, and then that gives me the listing of process objects. And then after I have those process objects, I may want to look at the amount of memory that's being used, or the amount of CPU time that's being used, or something like that. We may, quite often I need to sort processes, and because I'm wanting to look at something. So I get my processes, and then as they come across, then I want to sort them. And maybe I want to sort them by CPU and make sure that they're descending. Or maybe I only want the top 3 processes, the ones that are using the most CPU time. Yeah, or maybe I'm wanting to just get a unique listing of processes. And so stuff like that can be very useful. A lot of times I use a pipeline when I'm trying to sort event log entries. So I can get my event log information, only look for errors, and then sort them by the source. And in the next command here, then I also group those by source. And this is very useful for helping you to look at things or problems that you may be having on your server or your computer, and to try to find, like, who is causing the most problems. And so this could be a very, very useful technique. So now I'm going to demonstrate, using a pipeline to filter information. So I'm going to go back to the PowerShell. So now I'm sharing out my Windows PowerShell console. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen out. So I'm going to type CLS to clear the screen. And so let's take a look at processes. So I say get process, and I press enter. And we can see that it provides a lot of information that comes down. But I'm interested in the private memory. Now, one of the ways that we can find the properties to filter, I'm going to do this some more this time. And generally, when we're working with PowerShell, the columns that are across the heading, where it says PM for like private memory, or CPU for CPU time, or ID for process ID, or WS for working set. Generally, those column headings, I can use them inside a where object. So I can use them in my my filter to represent this information. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to filter for CPU time, and we're going to look for items that are using maybe more than, let's just say 10 on the CPU time. And, obviously this is completely arbitrary. So I'll say get process, and then I'm going to say where. And now we use these curly brackets again. So the curly bracket opens a script block. And remember I said that we need to use this $ underscore. So I'm going to say $, and then the underscore, and then period. Now this period is used to find the property on that object as it comes across the pipeline. Now we know that we're going to have process objects are going to be coming across the pipeline. And so as these process objects come across the pipeline, then I am going to filter out only the CPU time that is greater than, GT for greater than, and we'll just filter the ones that are greater than 10. And so then I'm going to close my curly bracket and I press enter. And we can see that there are 3 processes that are using more than 10 on my CPU cycles. And so that's kind of useful, and it's not sorted or anything. Well, if I'm really wanting to find out like who's using the most, and maybe my list is a bit longer, then I can sort it. So I'm going to send it to sort, and I'm going to sort it by CPU time, and I'm going to make it descending. And so then now we see that the PW console is using most, and then DWM, and then Explorer. And if I didn't do it descending, then it comes in the reverse order. So kind of useful to remember to work with. Well, remember we also maybe we're looking for a private memory, and so I could come back over here. And where the private memory, PM, is greater than. And now this time, these are all in kilobytes. And, and so that makes these numbers pretty big. So I'm not really concerned about kilobytes. I want to do this in megabytes. So where it's greater than 20 megabytes. And then I close my curly brackets. And so now we've found a listing of processes that are using more than 20 megabytes of private memory. And so then once again, I want to sort these. And so I'm going to sort by private memory. And I'm always interested in descending. So I use -D and press tab, and then that brings me my descending. And so now we can see that this particular service host is using the most private memory. After that, the Internet Explorer, then this PW console, and then MSC, blah, 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 PowerShell, Search Indexer, and some other stuff. So these are the ones that are bringing the most CPU time. Yeah, but maybe I'm wanting to maybe do some optimization or something, and so I want the ones that are taking the most, the top 3 in memory. So I'm going to select the first, and I can press tab, 3. And so now I've found these 3 processes that are using the most memory on my machine. And so this actually worked out pretty cool. Notice how we started off with one command, and then we piped it to the where object to make another command, and then we sorted it, and then we chose like the top 3 stuff. So all of this is we use this to kind of build. And maybe once I've found this information, maybe all of this other output here is too much, and maybe I would just want to put this into a table. So I can say format table, and choose the process name. And if I'm interested in the private memory and the CPU, and then I'm going to auto size this, and I press enter, and so now I've got my my processes and the private memory and the CPU information displayed. Now on these processes that are not displaying CPU information, and we're going to go back over here to get process. So we can see that there's a number here of processes that are not displaying CPU information. Well, this is because I'm logged on as a normal, plain old, everyday user. And because of this, then I do not have rights to see the CPU information from these other processes. And so remember, PowerShell is only going to let you do what the user that you're logged on with is allowed or is permitted to do. So I'm going to clear my screen. And let's take a look at the event log. And we're going to spend a day later on in the week where we're going to be working more with the event log. And we'll be working with both the classic logs and the tracing logs too. But for now, I just want to kind of show you some information that might help you get started. So I'm going to take a look at the application log. And then I'm interested in errors. And I'm going to go ahead. This is a really good one to send to more. And okay. Now this is kind of cool. I didn't mean to do this, but entry type argument errors does not belong to the set error, information, failure audit, success audit, or warning. So I used errors instead of error. And once we do this, then we can see that we're getting a bunch of errors from my event log. And so it's like 3 pages worth of errors. Now, I can kind of look through here and see that some of these are coming from web management, some are coming from some other stuff. You know, but to try to read through all of that begins to get a little cumbersome, and they have a tendency to begin to look the stuff. So the first thing I want to do is sort these by source. And once I do that, then now we've got an error. So we can see that these are all the win management errors. We got side-by-side errors, MSI errors, and so forth. Well, that's still an awful lot of information. So what I'm going to do now is I want to group these. So I'm going to say group by source. And when I do, then now we've got some really, really good information already. So we can see that 42 of the errors came from CAPI 2, 27 came from web management. Now what's interesting is when I was looking at this list on the screen, I was thinking originally that all of my errors were coming from web management because that's what I was seeing. And so I would not have discovered that 42 of them are actually coming from CAPI 2. There was only one application hang and 2 application errors. Then 2 MSI installer errors, and then 8 of these side by side. Okay, so this information is pretty good. Now, if the list was longer, then I may want to sort it by the count. Notice I said that we typically use these column headings to help us know what we can filter on, what we can sort on. So I'm going to sort by count, and I want these descending, of course. And so now the list is easy to read, and I can see most of my errors have been coming from CAPI 2. If I want to know the top 2, then look at that. It's my web management, and CAPI 2 is by and far the largest source of errors on this particular computer. So then this gives me information now where I could go in and start to look at those errors and focus in on that particular information. And that would be very useful for me, you know, from a troubleshooting perspective. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. So go back over here to my presentation. Okay, now one of the things that is real important from the use perspective is that because we can build these commands, kind of like little building blocks that you might have used when you were a child. Because we can stack these things together and just kind of stick them together, it becomes really easy for us to develop maybe some bad habits. And and that's fine if you're just kind of working at the command line and you're exploring some stuff. But many times the command is going to be easier to use the filter from the commandlet itself. Other times it may not necessarily be, but the performance is definitely an issue. And so when I say filter to the left, I mean to the left of the pipe. So here's the pipeline character, and we want to do as much filtering on this side as we possibly can. So of this pipe character. Okay? So, for instance, this particular command gets every single event from the application log, every single one of them. And then it sends it across the pipeline to the where object, where we're going to filter out and look for when these things were generated, when the errors were generated. Now, this command is fine, it works okay, but it's not going to be as good a performance as saying, only get me the event log entries that occurred after February the 28th. So you see, this is a much better query. Only give me the entries that occurred after this date. And so this is going to return a far fewer number of entries. This returns every one of them. Every single entry from the application log, and then we're filtering it out once we get it down. Now, if I was doing this from a remote computer, then that means we have to suck that great big old event log entry all the way across the pipe back to my computer, and we don't want to do that. Okay? Now, if you're ever curious about how commands are working, then use the measure command commandlet. I've written a number of Hey Scripty Guy blog articles where I've talked about using measure command. In fact, I've even written about half a chapter in my Windows PowerShell 2.0 Best Practices book, where I was talking about using measure command to optimize your command. Now, I get emails all the time from people, and quite often they say, well, you know, PowerShell is not near as fast as VBScript. And in many cases, that's true. But in many cases, you're not giving PowerShell a chance. You know, you're taking all of this information and just piping it across instead of filtering it out the way that it needs to. Now, sure, VBScript is fast, and in some cases, it's very, very fast. But it doesn't always make sense to spend an hour trying to write code that's going to save you 5 seconds of time. So let's kind of take a look at this from a demo perspective. So we're going to pop over to the PowerShell console. And what I'm going to do right now, first of all, is I'm going to clear my console, so we can give us a little bit of room here to work. And so we're going to start off with a bad query, if you will. And when I say bad query, I mean, I'm not really meaning it's bad, because they can certainly do this, and this is fine. So we're going to get the event log entries, and we're going to say where the time generated, so $_time generated is greater than, and we'll use this old date time object, so date. So date time, got to type it right, spelling count, date time, and then I'm going to cast this string to 28, 12, and close my curly brackets. Now, instead of sending all this stuff out, I'm going to send this to measure object, and there are 588 entries that are generated by this command. So rather than scrolling all 588 commands, entries from the event log, we just say, hey, there's 588 of these guys. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this a bit. So there is an after parameter on the event log. And the neat thing about the event after parameter is that it expects a date. So I do not even have to put this in quotes. I don't have to cast it to a date-time object. I didn't mean to grab that. I don't have to cast it to a date-time object. All I need to do is say, hey, 2/28/12. And I'm going to now measure how many entries we get from this. It says 588. That's strange. Wasn't expecting it to do that. So we come over here. And that lists all of those entries there. And then we say after 2/28. Oh, okay. So, okay, I know what's going on there. So, in this first one, we did in fact filter those out, and then that's true. So it's the same number of commands. I confused myself, sorry about that. Measure. So there's 2189. So in the first example here, so in this first example right here, what we're doing is we're taking all 2,189 entries, and then we're sending them across the pipeline and filtering them out, and then that does in fact give us only that 588 entries. But in this last command, what we're doing is we're only returning the 588 entries. So that's the difference. So this command returns only the ones that occurred after that. And this command here, what we're doing is we return all of the entries from the event log, and then we filter out only the number, and we did see that it's the same number. Now, what is the difference in speed? Well, sometimes the speed is not all that huge of a difference, and then sometimes it is. So in the first command, this is the one that takes all of the entries, and then we filter it out. So we're going to come up to the beginning, and we're going to measure the command. And use my curly brackets there. And then I'm going to go to the end and add my curly brackets there. And so that command took 341 milliseconds. Now this last command that we use here, I'm going to add my curly brackets there, measure command, and then open my curly brackets there, and it took 144 milliseconds. So this was more than twice as long as this one. Now, in all fairness, I should say that using measured command is not really accurate at the millisecond level. But from a proportion standpoint, we can kind of get the idea that this command is definitely faster than this previous command. And from a network traffic standpoint, this command is definitely much more efficient. So you definitely want to make sure then that what you do is that you filter to the left, if at all possible. Okay? Now, one of the other things that I like to do with the pipeline command is I like to use the pipeline commandlet to format the output. And so what we can do with this is there's a number of commandlets that we have that automatically allow us to present information. So I can use format table, and that easily creates a nice table. I can use a format list, and that allows me to display a lot of information. And then the other thing that we can do is we can use format wide. And the nice thing about using format wide is that allows me to specify a certain number of, it allows me to choose a number of pieces of related information. Well, let's kind of demo that for a little bit. So we're going to go back over to my PowerShell console, and in the PowerShell console, then what I'm going to do is we're going to work a little bit with the with formatting the output. So I'm going to clear the screen, and so I can say get process, and we'll send this to going to select the first one entry. And by doing this, it allows me to see my column headings and the data that might be associated with it. And so I can choose now. I can look at this list and I can say, well, I want to do a table. And in my table, I want the name and the process ID. And I'm going to send this to more. And when we do, then we can see that we get the names and the process IDs from the information. Now, you'll notice that when I do this, it automatically displays this information like, screen wide. And this isn't the best output, to be honest. I might want to tighten that up. And so what I can do is I can use the auto size parameter. So I say -A, and I hit tab, and that will automatically size this for me. And then I'll go ahead and send this to more again. And now we can see that it tightened the output up. So we've got the names and the IDs, and what it did is it looked for the width of the longest name, and then it gave us an extra space, and then it displayed the process ID information. So this is very useful. One thing that you need to keep in mind, though, is that when using this commandlet, it can really slow things down because it has to count a look at the length of every single one of these properties of every single one of these objects. And as it goes through all of these objects, then after it has found the maximum length, then it knows how wide to make the columns. And so it essentially causes it to make like 2 passes to go through this. And so it can really slow things down a little bit. But for something like get process or get service or something, then that's fine. So I may want to take get service, for instance. And I'm going to select just the first one entry there. And so we see that we have a column that's status and a column that's name and then the display name. And so I may want to make a table of this, format table and name and status. And we already know that we want to automatically size our table. And we'll send this to more. And so we can see then that notice that some of these names are pretty long. And so that we came through here. And now I'm going to show you something that, and I'm going to just do Control-C and break that command. And so let's come up here and take a look at this. Now, what happens quite often is that people use get service and get my services, and then they send it to a table, and this looks good, but then they decide, hey, I want to sort this by the status. So I want all of my running services and all of the stop services to be grouped together. And so they go to the end of the line down here, and then they will say sort by status. And then when we run the command, then we're actually going to see an error. And this error is really, really confusing. Now, one of the things with Windows PowerShell, that is really nice generally, is that the errors are generally helpful and useful and easy to understand. This one is not. It says the object of type internal format data is not valid or in the correct sequence. So that gets really confusing. This is likely caused by a user-specified format-star command that is conflicting with the default formatting. That is confusing, but the key is right here. A user-defined or user-specified format-star. Well, here's format-table. And then it says is not in the correct sequence. So we tried to create a table, and then after we created that table, then we're trying to sort the status. Now, this is like we sent this command to the printer, and all of this has been printed out on a piece of paper. And then if we want to try to sort it, it's not going to work, because you can't sort a piece of paper that's already been printed. Well, maybe if you get scissors and a piece of tape you can, but it's not going to be too neat. And we can see here, this isn't too neat. So what we want to do then is move that sort command in front of the format command. So I'm going to say sort by status, and then send it to my format table. And when I do, then you can now see that the command worked, and we've got everything grouped by the status. So this is real important to keep in mind when it comes time to working or formatting our output. Your format commands must always be at the very end of your pipeline. So any sorting or grouping that you want to do it before you send it to the format. Now, there is an exception, and let's go back over here. So I'm going to say get process, and I'm going to format that table, and I want name and ID. Now, we can group in our table. So I could say group by name. And then I'm going to automatically size it. And when I do, this will be a nice way to look at this, because we can see that there are some processes, let's send this to more, that have multiple, so that we have multiple instances of the same process. So there's RSS, iExplore, and so forth, and so on. Service host, of course, has a large number of instances, and so then we come through there. So this is one way that I can group after I have used format table, but that's because the group by is actually part of the format table. Let's see, let me demonstrate to you format list. I use format list all the time, and the thing that's nice about format list is that it will display all of my information on this. I'm going to send this to more. So what this is going to do is it's going to display all of the information about each process that's running on the machine. And so the first process is this ACL blah, blah, blah process. And we can see that it gives me the information about the handles, the virtual memory, the working set, the private memory. This stuff doesn't show up. It may be because I'm not logged on as an admin. And then we get the handles and the other information. And I'm going to hit the tab key. We can see that we've got all of this other information is displayed. And then there's even other objects that are stored there. We've got a number of threads that are in this process. And all of this is still on that very first process that we were looking at. And now we get, here is the second instance of the process. So this is really, really good to use when you're wanting to try to just see an example of all of the information that may be available about a particular object. And so in this particular case then, I can find this information and then be able to use it. Certainly it's a lot more information than we see just from using get process. So we can see that it displays only a little bit of the information that is actually available to us. Now, format wide is kind of cool because I can use it to display information in a different type of display. So I'm going to use get process, and I only want the name. And then I press enter. And so by default, we've got two columns that only to show the name. This is actually kind of useful for when you're wanting to do maybe a PowerPoint slide deck or something. There were some slides that I needed for a presentation I was doing at TechEd. And, I sent it to format wide so that I could just highlight that and paste it into my slide deck. Now, if you're not sure how many columns you can use, you can just keep adding them on here, or you can say auto size, and it will list those for you. Now, auto size will do the maximum number of columns you can without trimming anything. But look at this 4-column display. So if I already know that this is a presentation font cast, and this is Flash utility something or other, then this may be an acceptable format, even though I'm not quite getting all of that information from those two really long process names. So, format wide, it's a limited use, but sometimes it can be helpful or useful. So we're going to go back to the slide deck over here, and I believe that this is, let's go back over here, so we demoed that. The last thing I think that we need to talk about is piping this to output to persist the information. And this can be really useful because as you're looking at things, then it's not always, I may need to use this information later. And once I close my PowerShell console, the information is gone. Well, I use pipelining all the time in order to save this information. So I'm going to, this time I am going to actually share my entire desktop. And so now I've got my whole desktop over here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the screen. And I'm going to say get process. And I'm going to write this out to we're sorted in a table, so I'm going to say format table, and I want the name and the ID. I'm going to automatically size it, and then I'm going to write this to a file, so I'm going to say C:, or out file, and then this is the file path, C:, /FSO, /sort, process, .text, and then I send it to a text file. Now I'm going to open this up over here, so I'm going to go to Explorer. And then once I go to Explorer, I'm going to find my FSO folder and going to take a look at this sorted text file. And so you can see this is my sorted text file. This is the same type of output that we would have had that would have been displayed directly to the PowerShell console. One of the nice things is to throw this out to a CSV file. So I'm going to use GPS. This is the alias for get process. I'm going to select the name and the ID, and I'm going to export this to a CSV file. export CSV, and specify my path is // FSO /sort proc.csv. And when I do, then it opens that up. Now I'm going to open this up in Notepad first of all. So we'll say Notepad. And we can see that we have a CSV file. So we got the name and the ID, and then we have all of our this information. If I open this in Excel, then this first column here is going to kind of mess up my output. And so I'm going to delete that file, and I'm going to show you how to get rid of that that header information. We say no type information. And then once I do that, then I can open it up in Notepad, and you'll see that that top column of information has now gone. So that's putting it into a file, that's putting it into a CSV file. The nice thing is I can open this CSV file directly in Excel and be able to use that information. Now I'm going to use get process, and I'm going to throw this into an XML file. So export client XML, specify my path, call this proc /FSO proc.xml, and press enter, and it writes it out to an XML file. So I'm going to show you this. We'll try to open it in Notepad, and you can see that it's XML information there. And this is fine. What I like to do with this, is to actually put this in a variable. So I'm going to say $A, and I'm going to import the client XML, and the path is /FSO /proc XML. And then once I do this, and I say $A, and you'll notice that it looks exactly like this information that we had earlier. And so I can sort this by name if I want to. I can do this descending, and so it flips it around. And so this allows me to work with this process information in an offline fashion. And that's the really cool thing about using the export client XML. So we're going to go back to our presentation. And that is it. So got a listing of the Scripting Guy articles, the Scripting Guy blog. You want to check those out. Pay attention to the scripting games that are beginning on April the 2nd. Take that link to take a look at it. So we've got a few questions over here, and let's see here. Let's see. I'm trying to write my first script to ping a group of servers tonight after an outage, see if they're up or not. I did a little more digging and found something like test connection. Yep. That command looks like it would probably work. It says that it'll list both the servers that are up and down on the list. What you want to do is to use that, and then only and then filter out the ones that are down, so that you're not getting connection to. I did a Hey Scripting Guy blog article where I talked about that. Should you always use a space to separate characters in the pipeline? You don't have to, but it makes it easier to read. When the computer gets IP from DHCP to work on a group, it says the connection is unidentified when RM will not be able to. The easiest way to do this, it has to be on a home network or a domain network, and the best way to do that is actually just to remove it in your network adapters, and then re-add the network for the network adapter, and then you should be able to set that. like today instead of 3:13:12. I do that by using the datetime : now, or just simply use get date. You're measuring after you filter it. Okay. The webcast PDF is broken. Phil could check that out. Why would I want to use CLI versus XML? I kind of talked about that. CLI XML allows me to get multiple levels and nesting for reconstituting the object. CSV makes it really easy to throw out into a to an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Is there a way to fix the column list for format table? You can specify the number of columns. I'm not certain about changing, about saying that I wanted a 20 character width. I'm not sure I've ever done that. Do I PowerShell script from a web interface, ASP language, and PowerShell 3? Get the beta, play around with that. There's a feature that is in PowerShell 3 that would let you do that. You may want to play around, look at that. There's also some third-party applications that will let you do that. How do I do a VLOOKUP via PowerShell? If you mean a VLAN lookup, I'm not sure. However, you would do it in any other language. There's not any commandlets that I know of directly that would do that. There may be some commandlets that would let you do that in Win8. In the beta, you may want to get that and kind of play around with it. Okay, so that is it. One other question. Okay. Is there a limit to the number of objects being returned by the directory searcher? Sure. It's 1,500, just like with anything else, but you can specify a parameter to allow you to go past that. Didn't realize you could pipe a format command to a file. What else can you pipe a format command into? Well, that would be probably about it, because once you send something to a format type of command, a format table, format wide or something, it changes the object, so you have a format object instead of the native object. But it does let us do that to a text file. Okay, so that's all the questions that we got, and we're kind of running a little long, but we kind of started a little bit late because of some technical issues. We were playing around trying to change some of the audio issues that we were having the other day. So keep in touch. I've got a lot of ways to keep in touch. You can send me email. You can even post comments on the blog and stuff like that. Okay, so there's the information about the Q&A, and then we've got the survey at the end. So make sure that you take the survey. We do look at the survey, so matter of fact, because of some of the comments that was on yesterday's survey, that's why I didn't try to do as much scrolling and tried to use more command and while we were looking at the audio. So we do pay attention to that stuff. And that's it. I hope you all have a great day. Bill?
All right, thank you, Ed. And ladies and gentlemen,